Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, which is titled Enhancing Your Third-Party Due Diligence Program Without Increasing Costs. And it's my pleasure to introduce our panelist, Marie Stöttner. She is a certified compliance officer and works as a compliance expert at RHR Magnesita. Her main focus areas are trade compliance, business partner due diligence, anti-corruption, and data privacy. She has studied law in Vienna, Austria, and has previously worked at Austrian law firms. So we will get started. And as I said, today we will talk about Tcertification, which is a detailed due diligence review, analysis, and approval process. The review includes definitive requirements that the candidate needs to fulfill. So managing third-party relationships often occupies, of course, a disproportionate amount of compliance officers' time and efforts. And conducting due diligence on third parties, it's both time-consuming and expensive. Compliance officers often say that their programs are expected year upon year to be more sophisticated and broader in reach without raising costs to do so. And so there's, of course, a limit to how far due diligence budgets can be stretched. And the economic challenges of the past years have, of course, made this even more challenging. So a shared cost model allows companies to allocate these limited funds in a smart way, because due diligence can be streamlined and shared. All due diligence reports have a few baseline items in common: beneficial ownership, qualifications, ties to the government, and reputational screening, which we shouldn't insist on handling in a bespoke manner. And also, most commercial intermediaries work with several multinational companies. And third parties are happy to pay for a due diligence review that meets international requirements, which they can then share with an unlimited number of global business partners. Multinational companies are then free to reallocate resources to analysis of reports, mitigation of specific risks, and other more complex and judgment-laden compliance challenges. So this model shifts the responsibility for vetting anti-bribery concerns to intermediaries, who will then maintain their own compliance information. And obviously, the requirements are the same regardless of who pays. So, Marie, if you would tell us a little bit about your due diligence program, what challenges have you faced in implementing a program across a multi-layered and complex third-party network?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. So first of all, welcome also from my side. I'm happy to share my experiences because I need to say trace is really something I haven't experienced before. It's a unique system, which we also have rolled out throughout our company, and it heavily supports our business partner due diligence and our checks we do. And as you pointed out, Pia, what is worth to mention on trace is specifically that it supports the compliance officer's work, which we would otherwise need to do manually. And I would say it's a great base that compliance officers then can start off with. Speaking about our due diligence program, so it's first of all, it's a risk-based approach we're taking, because we have, what is a bit peculiar in our organization is we have different sorts and different types of third parties we work with. So of course, taking into consideration what kind of third parties they are, what kind of risks they potentially expose us to, we have then filtered out and really analyzed what needs to be done for what categories of business partners. We have we are now currently using trace for a specific category, and this I need to say it really works out fine because it doesn't overload the organization. But on the other hand, we are currently specifying really where is it needed and what third parties can be better managed, maybe with other tools or systems, or maybe it's enough to just have an automatic sanction screening running in the back. What challenges? I would say the biggest challenge was actually, I mean, it's easy to imagine, but but the communication, the first rollout and the communication within the company, meaning that meaning that what I can share as an experience is it makes sense to onboard the relevant stakeholders as soon as possible, just to make sure that everyone is on board and is aware of what activities, what tasks he needs to do in this trace certification process. For us, for example, it's several departments which are being involved, like the operational management team, the sales units, of course, because they need to make sure that the business partners they work with, they are actually being trace certified, us, and we are the ones. Compliance actually only looks into the identified red flags, which is also huge learning ahead from this rollout of trace, and which I very much like the way these trace reports are being built up, meaning that it identifies, like very much at the first page in the summary slide, it highlights the red flags the trace specialist has identified when screening. And it is then an easy task for us, for the compliance team, to look into this and then to understand from a content perspective, is this something which we can mitigate somehow? Is this something which is of high relevance? Is it something which is a total no-go for us, or is it something which is acceptable under certain conditions and can be mitigated? So this standard, I need to say, it was also a learning for us, because I didn't know, of course, in the upfront what kind of categories of these red flags trace provides. But I need to say it totally makes sense, and it's also something which we can then track, meaning that we track for the third parties what kind of red flags occur. So to be able to transparently follow up on these items. Yeah, so biggest challenge in a nutshell, I would say communication rollout for sure. So just make sure to include the relevant stakeholders as soon as possible.
Excellent, thank you. You touched on this already a little bit, but maybe you want to elaborate as to the risk-based approach and the risk mapping.
Yeah, the risk mapping. Maybe something, because I'm just thinking what is important for the trace, from the trace certification perspective. Maybe this I can share. What we have done in the very much beginning is to somehow map and to somehow categorize, like to build together and to structure the kind of different kinds of red flags which occur and which trace then identifies and sends over. So we have mapped those and then differentiated into, we've done some kind of risk assessment. So meaning that, I don't know, if this red flag occurs, what is the next step? Is this something we can easily mitigate? Is this something which needs to be escalated to a different team? Is it what we also use as a category is monitoring. So we just say, okay, it's relevant to know, but it doesn't need an ad hoc support or as an ad hoc mitigation action, but it's worth to know, and it's something we want to just monitor over the years. And what I also very much like about this trace approach is the setup, meaning that we have this initial assessment which is being done, and then we have two other categories. So this mid-year report and the renewal process. So the renewal is like on a yearly basis. So the certification is running for 1 year and then it's being renewed. And this mid-year report would pop up if anything changes in between. So for example, if the ownership changes, or if any significant changes on the business partner occur throughout. So this is also something we have included in our risk assessment, meaning that, of course, we have safety, that there's an ongoing screening and ongoing safety taking place in the back. These are the main points, I would say, from a risk-based approach.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And then I'm wondering, and I often get asked this question with new customers, but or this comes up, what points were you considering and what finally made you decide to utilize the portable model and to require the third party to pay?
I mean, I need to say I looked into Trace when it was communicated to me. Like it was brought up at some occasion. Then I looked into it. Then we also attended presentations on this, and then we just thought, okay, it's an interesting approach, I would say, first of all, and an approach which is really the most convenient and comfortable one for the in-house compliance colleagues, simply due to the fact that you have a layer, like you have someone who does the job as a kind of a pre-filter for you, what you would usually need to do on a manual basis. And I mean, the best part, which is that the third party is paying the costs on its own. And what I need to say, what I've been a bit skeptical in the very beginning, is that actually third parties are willing to pay. So this is something. I mean, of course, it doesn't apply to everyone everywhere in the world, but in general, we have made the experience. But this is something which, of course, it's a bit of a struggle at the first, but it does work. Meaning that if management is convinced, and this was something a good learning, if management is convinced and if the rules are clear, meaning that you either pay or you're not business partner anymore, it works. This is my experience. So these two things I would say are the most peculiar ones. Like this is really it's a really good support, meaning that it's time saving, it's clear, like the results are clear, it's comprehensive, and yeah, the model with the cost is quite convenient. I haven't seen this before, so
Yeah, that's the obvious benefit to the multinational company, the savings in time and money. But some have been nervous about this approach at first, as it's a new way of thinking about due diligence review
yes,
costs. And they worried, as you indicated, that their third parties might not want to pay and will resist this approach. And truly, the opposite has been true, not just in your case with your company, but we've seen more generally little or no resistance to the requests to pay. Third parties are happy to cover the cost and then be spared multiple reviews. Third parties also take the review more seriously when they know that their report may be shared widely. So when more than one business partner may be looking at the report, the third party will make sure that the information is correct. I think they feel more accountable. And we simply see this model growing. More and more multinational companies are adopting this approach. Today's economic climate and cuts in compliance departments are driving more and more companies to the shared cost model. And as I mentioned earlier, multinational companies are then able to reallocate resources to analysis of the reports and other more complex and judgment-laden compliance challenges. So you talked about a few challenges when you rolled out the Tcertification requirement. Um, Anything else you want to add? What comes to acceptance, the management, and the role, the concept internally?
yeah. Two key points are making sure upfront who is doing what, just to not have any issues afterwards on who is checking the report, who is actually tracing the guys to make it to undergo this trace certification. I mean, this should be clear, not with compliance, but it's could be a struggle, right, if you don't define upfront. So I would say really having this kind of, I mean, we have built up kind of a mini process where it's really laid out between the departments involved who needs to do what. Who is like the first, who is also the person who facilitates, who is actually working with the portal, so Trace portal, who does the reporting. I said like kind of also a process on what is being done or what are the consequences if this report shows specific red flags. It's still a business decision. I mean, there can be red flags which would also trigger Trace to not issue the certificate, But in most cases, it's really something which needs to be internally assessed and then on a risk-based approach being taken into consideration and being evaluated. So this is the other learning, really this process upfront also. And the third one I would say here is the management commitment. So of course it's super helpful, especially also internally and of course externally, to know that you have someone in your back who says that we are committed to this, we do this, and there's also no way around. And as you said before, also with the third parties, I mean, also to be honest, we don't use it for every third party, but I said for specific parties, if this is clearly committed and there is no, I would say there is no room for discussion, right? Then it works.
Right. That is the truth. That the messaging from the multinational needs to be clear.
Yes.
That this is not a request; it's a requirement, and then generally everything will be completed smoothly and in a timely manner. Well, so are there any regions or territories where there seem to be more problems with getting third parties to cooperate?
It's the usual suspicious countries or regions, I would say, Near and Middle East and CIS. Yes. I mean, this is my experience. I
Yeah,
mean,
go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I mean that's pretty much it. It's a very specific question. It's a very, of course, it's a subjective feeling from my side. These countries, we just had the experience that they tend to discuss this prerequisite. But as said, I mean it was supported all over the time that it's a non-negotiable, and this must be clear. And of course, the consequence could be that some of them are not on board anymore. But I think, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, if someone is a bit reluctant in doing this, for us actually in our risk mapping, it's a red flag, right?
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And we here at Tcompliance, we've conducted due diligence reviews in all non-sanctioned countries. And we've seen really a general paradigm shift in recent years. Years ago, third parties would not be familiar with the due diligence process. They would not understand why we need certain information, and they would resist. And now, even
Yes.
small companies in remote locations have heard about the due diligence requirements. They understand the importance of anti bribery efforts. And we are also able to reach out to third parties that don't have the latest technology available to them. And of course, it's important to be able to communicate using the candidate's own language, the local language. And we here at Tcompliance, we have over 30 languages in-house.
That's a very good point that I would just like to add on, especially for the Russian speaking colleagues, or the I would say the whole Middle East, the whole CIS region. We used to also have the experience that they are requiring, one of the first arguments is we can't do it in English, which is usually also not true, but this is one of the arguments we could easy counter target with saying yes, but it's also available in other languages.
Yeah,
So this is
yeah,
also very
absolutely.
beneficial.
Absolutely. And of course, when we use the local language, we can make sure that misunderstandings aren't the reasons for possibly winding up with incorrect information. So I would like to mention some of the benefits to the third party. We've been talking about the benefits to the multinational. Those are clear. But this approach eliminates the redundant reviews, as I mentioned before, and gives the third party the ability to share the verified due diligence information with an unlimited number of their global business partners. And they really, once they complete the review process, they gain a valuable business advantage of being recognized in the compliance community as having already gone through a rigorous due diligence review. They save time and money by avoiding the duplication in filling similar due diligence questionnaires requested by different business partners. And it really differentiates the third party from the competition. I mean, it shows certain seriousness about being compliant, and having the compliance documents ready to go often opens a lot of doors and tends to really speed the pace of business. I'd also like to mention that among other benefits, the third party can train up to 40 additional employees on anti-bribery compliance using our multilingual online training courses. And many of them take us up on this offer, as we know online training is expensive, and small and medium-sized companies frequently don't have access to that. So the training requirement is part of the Tcertification review. One key person must complete anti-bribery training, but then in addition to that, we allow them to train up to 40 employees. Another advantage here is that the third party can get out ahead of any red flags that will be commonly found by any company conducting similar due diligence. So this reputation insurance ensures that the third party is informed of these negative results so that they can take proactive measures and reassure their business partners, refute erroneous data, false positives, or take corrective measures as needed. So they'll have this information first rather than a multinational company that starts to conduct due diligence on them. And I'll mention one more great benefit from the third party's perspective. Companies and individuals that have completed the Tcertification within the last year are included in the intermediary directory, which is a publicly searchable database of potential pre-vetted business partners. And you can request and obtain the Tcertified due diligence reports in this intermediary directory at no cost, because each report is always only paid once. So that directory, it can be accessed via our website, and it includes thousands of distributors, sales representatives, brokers, consultants, and other third parties in over 150 countries. So we have a couple of more minutes left, and here's one question to Marie. Are there any lessons learned you would suggest to other companies considering this portable model approach that you haven't already touched on?
Haven't already touched on. The most important I have already touched upon. I mean, what was not clear for me personally from the start on, but what is, I mean, I mentioned today several times, and maybe it was just because I was not. I also need to say I was not engaged very much at the start in the first discussions and presentations with Tcompliance, but afterwards. So what was not clear for me, to be honest, is this principle or the strategy of Tcompliance to outline red flags, meaning that it's got to do a bit with the wording, like how to formulate, because we in our contracts used to have this clause where it says that once the third party is certified by Tcompliance, like it was a condition kind of, if this one is certified, it's okay to continue business with. But then we adopted and changed to if certified, and also if it is internally, the red flags are assessed as being mitigated. It's a small thing, but it's actually, this one drove us crazy in the start, meaning it's an easy thing if you know. If it was just a bit of a learning for us to understand the principle. But I said, I mean, the principle makes totally sense, and this is also how business partner due diligence works, right? It's mostly never, like 95% not a yes or no, but it's you need to know, you need to be able to make an informed decision, and this is what it supports. So the report actually supports this call for the company to be able to assess. And then, to be very honestly speaking, what is also a learning, but this is a bit above Tcompliance. I mean, as said before, I shortly touched base, kind of an overall business partner due diligence concept. Of course, Tcompliance is one part, and it's a very, very important part. But of course, we just need to be, we as compliance, we just need to be aware that there could be other red flags which are not related to Tcompliance. Meaning that, as I said before, like if someone is, I don't know, pushing back all the time, giving unprecise reasons, it's a red flag, which is of course not in, you can't find in a report, because the report is per se not applicable. So it's something we just adopted slightly in our reporting, meaning that, yeah, as I said, I mean, we had a strategy to like go through all third parties, but then we also outlined and also reported on the ones which somehow had some issues. Also, I mean, to be honest, what is also really interesting are the ones which, I mean, they work as a specific entity, and then all of a sudden, when it comes to Tcompliance, they change the company, like the legal entity. It's also a red flag. We need to understand. We as compliance need to make sure to assess it. It's something, of course, which is not shown in the Tcompliance report. But as said, I mean, this is something, it's a bit broader. It's a more compliance topic. But I would say this is really something which one can easily find out, and it just needs to be addressed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The fact that the fact that a company or an individual is T certified doesn't mean that there will be no red flags. There are certain red flags, of course, that prevent certification. But certain red flags are shown in the executive summary. And depending on your business relationship with this third party, they may or may not be relevant to you. So that's a good point. That's a good point to make. So just to wrap up here, I would say that I see this model taking over the traditional model of multinational companies alone carrying the costs of due diligence. I see third parties more and more interested in getting T certified independently and taking advantage of this opportunity to train their employees. And I see third parties really caring about due diligence and then proudly displaying their T certified logo in their marketing materials. And they are approaching us because because they've noticed that their competitors are T certified, and they want to be part of that group, and they want to understand what that means. So this will result in third parties taking responsibility of their due diligence. It's no longer just a requirement that needs to be satisfied as quickly as possible, but something that the third parties are beginning to embrace. And they're starting to share the goal of abiding by transparent business practices with multinational companies. So I know we have used up all of our time. So at this stage, I would like to thank Marie for her time and great explanation of your experiences. I know this type of knowledge is very useful to everyone out there to understand how it's already been done in practice. So thank you for that, and thank you to our audience. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the day.